The next game features Bobby Fischer playing with White from the Havana Olympiad in 1966. And this is not really a direct attacking game, but Fischer plays in a very meticulous and calculated positional way. And what he's able to do is basically maximize the strengths of each of his individual pieces until it just becomes overwhelming for Black. But he does this in a very, I don't want to say simple, but a very direct way. Definitely the trademark of his style with clear forcing lines. And so this can help us to calculate better and to figure out which squares our piece is best on. And normally when we can answer those questions, it can guide us to find a strong plan. And that's exactly what he does here. So let's start out the game here. So it was a French defense, and throughout his career, Fischer played this King's Indian attack, which starts after the move to d3. He played some very famous games in the King's Indian attack, both in the sense that some of them were direct attacking games where he got a strong attack against his opponent's king, and then other games like this where he just slowly ground the other guy down and eventually just established total dominance in the position. So this is a very positional opening. White's idea is that he's just slowly building up, and he plays the move g3. Okay, Black plays the move g6 in this game. One thing about this particular move order that people figured out was that White could play the move d4 now, which looks very strange because it looks like it wastes the tempo, but after this, the idea is that now White wants to play his knight to b5 and then to d6 and to use that hole over there on d6. So this is a totally viable way to play also, of course. Okay, but he played bishop to g2, bishop to g7, castles, and knight g7. So Black plays in a kind of cunning way. He has not decided what to do with this pawn. Maybe it will go here to d6 or to d5. So he's keeping White guessing. Okay, but now Fischer declares his intentions by playing the move c3. So his idea is very simple. He wants to occupy the center with the move d4, so he's preparing for that. Okay, Black could play d5 here. I don't think d6 would be so strong. That's basically what he played in the game. First he castled though, and then White played d4. And now the normal continuation here would be to take on d4 and d5. And the point is he's fighting for the center, and after e5 we get this closed position, and Black would probably want to play the move b6 in order to allow his bishop to come out there at some point if possible. So that would be a totally different kind of game. Instead Black played this move d6, which I don't think it's a bad move, but it certainly makes his life a little bit harder because it's not as active as the other line. And Fischer played very concretely against this. First he took the pawn, so he's opening the d file, and now he plays queen e2. So maybe he wants to bring the rook over to d1, and eventually I think the idea is that White is going to try and use this d6 square, maybe in a way like this, and finally putting a knight there with help from the rook on d1. And another thing to keep in mind in this type of position with this pawn structure, if we just go back, is that White's square here on d4 is covered by this pawn, and black will have a lot of problems fighting for the center here. He can't put a knight there. Um, Whereas black's position is a little bit looser because of this d6 square that I was mentioning. White can play his pieces into the square eventually. So that's why I think this position is more pleasant to play for white. Also, white has more space, which is not trivial at all. Okay, black plays the move b6, so he's trying to do something with his light squared bishop. And now white took even more space with the move e5. I think he had a few options here. I mean, he could have played the move rook to d1. That move looks okay to me. I don't really see a move other than queen to c7 for black. And then maybe the move knight a3 would be strong. And white's threatening to play maybe knight b5 and knight d6. And this position doesn't look entirely fun to play for black. Doesn't look too fun. Doesn't look too promising. Yeah, that move rook d1 looks okay. But the move he played e5 is also very good. So he's taking over space, and now he's opening up this diagonal for the bishop, and also he's clamping down on not just d6 but f6 also. So maybe at some point we could see a maneuver like this in order to fight for those squares also. Okay, so black declares his intentions by playing the move a5. So he wants to put the bishop on a pretty active square here on a6, and okay, that's a pretty annoying threat. So white plays the move rook e1. It's interesting that he played the move rook e1 instead of rook d1. I think the point of rook e1 is just that he wants to protect this pawn up here on e5, and his idea is after bishop a6, which was played in the game, the queen goes to e4, and yeah, it might look like black is pretty active, and he does have some kind of activity here. I mean, he's not just sitting back passively and waiting for things to happen. So that's definitely something to be applauded here, because it could be very easy to fall into a passive position here for black. But as we'll see in the game, eventually his position does get passive, and he just has a difficult time doing anything. So he started out with the move rook a7, which might look strange, I think, to some people. But it's a logical move. The idea is that, first of all, he gets out of this bishop's range, and then secondly, maybe he wants to play the rook to d7 and control the only open file. So it's not an illogical move here. Okay, white plays the move knight to d2. So I think he is probably going to try and maneuver the knight to c4 if he can. So for example, if black had played the move rook to d7 here, then I think he would have played the move knight to c4 probably. And white's plan is pretty simple. He can cement this knight on c4 and gain some control on the queen side with the typical move a4, and maybe he can play the move bishop to g5 at some point, or bishop to f4, and just slowly build up. As we'll see in the game, white makes some key exchanges which kind of show the weakness of black's position. Okay, so he played knight b to d2. Black played the move bishop to d3, so looks like he's fairly active here. But actually, I think it's kind of a pseudo activity, because it's hard for him to have a plan. It's hard for him to carry out a plan here. Queen h4 is played. So white is maybe signaling that he'll play on the king's side. I think he's threatening to play the move knight e4, which at first doesn't look too scary, because maybe it looks like black can take this pawn on e5, but I think he'll come under a very strong attack if he tries to do that on the dark squares. So black has to be careful here. So he saw the danger of his position and played the move knight to d5 here, trying to propose an exchange of queens. And Fischer seized upon the opportunity here to show that it's actually not just the kingside attacking chances that give white a better position here, but it's the pawn structure and the ability to obtain a positional bind, which he does. Okay, so he starts taking the queen, and now what I was talking about with this binding move. This is a very typical move that we should always keep in mind, which is to try and fix the pawn structure, as we call it. So we take away the flexibility of these three pawns here. And also, we can see that white is controlling this square, and if we can imagine a knight coming to c4, then he would be attacking the b6 pawn, and it would be difficult to defend it. So this is a very, very strong move. Rook a to d7. So once again, black is playing in a way that looks very active. But now white makes a very, very strong move. Fischer judges that his plan will be much easier to carry out if these light squared bishops are off the board, because then the bishop will not be controlling the c4 square. His knight can go to the c4 square. Once his knight from d2 goes to the c4 square, his bishop on c1 is able to be developed, and so he just calmly retreats his bishop back to f1. And it's difficult for black to decline this exchange. I mean, if he played a move like bishop to f5, for example, then I think the move bishop to b5 would be strong. And let's say he plays the move rook to c7 to get out of the pin, and then knight c4, and so white's getting what he wants here anyway. He's slowly building up the pressure. So he took here on f1. King took back. Took back with the king because he can't take back with the rook, because then he would lose the pawn on e5. And this move wouldn't be logical anyway, because the rook is active on e1. And he doesn't want to take back with the knight, because the knight is headed for c4, and so that would just kind of delay the maneuver even more. So he takes back with the king. And it's difficult for black to do anything here. And it's precisely because of the inflexibility of his pawn structure. He doesn't have a way to create counterplay based on a pawn break. So he can't play the move f6, because white would take that, and then whichever way black takes back, he's going to lose this e6 pawn. And so yeah, he just can't really create any counterplay. So it's back to playing a move like knight e7, and he's trying to use the battery of rooks on the d file to achieve something. But now after knight c4, we see that there's really nowhere for these rooks to go on the d file. There's no way to penetrate into the white position. White has no weaknesses. That's extremely important. He has no weaknesses. He has nothing to attack. So he'll just slowly maneuver his pieces into better and better positions, as happened in the game. So I think the first sign that something had gone wrong for black is signaled by the next move, knight c8. So his knight is driven into a passive position. If he had defended the pawn in a more usual way, let's say with the move rook to b7, I don't really think that would have changed anything. White could play the move bishop to g5, and now he's going to try and fight for the d file with rook d1 and exchange a pair of rooks, and so this would just be clearly better for white also. Played the move knight to c8, and the idea is that, okay, at least he has the d1 square covered, so white will not be able to exchange rooks there, or so that's what he thought. First white started with the move bishop to g5. Okay, we just talked about the d1 square and the importance of the battery. So if black had moved this rook, for example, then white would be very, very happy to control the d file, either by after black exchanges on d1 or moves the rook. So after the move bishop to g5, he dropped the other knight back to e7. Okay, and now white played a very strong move. He played the move knight f to d2. And the point is just that on f3, the knight is not really accomplishing much. On d2, the knight has a very good future here on e4, either to come into f6 or to come into d6. And we should keep in mind that we always want to play against our opponent's weaknesses. And here, black has made holes on d6 and f6. A hole is a square that a pawn can never control. And yeah, so this is a good way to take advantage of the weaknesses that black has made. Okay, so black plays the move h6. And now white saw another opportunity to improve his position through forcing moves. So when you have a position like this and you can change the material balance, you should always try and calculate to see whether it's favorable, because many times it will be. And Fischer was very good at finding these types of exchanges and playing with a good minor piece against a bad minor piece, for example. And so he took the knight. And the first point is that if black takes with his knight, then white will move the knight in here. And now b6 is definitely hanging. And so black would have to take care of that in some way. I don't know, probably, let's say he went back to his usual plan of knight to c8. And now I think the move rook a3 is very strong, with the idea of rook b3, and he's going to go after that weakness some more, try to win it. So instead he played the move rook takes e7, but white played the same idea, rook to a3. And yeah, he doesn't even have to move this knight on d2 yet, because the knights here are supporting each other, and he's just improving his worst placed piece here on a1. So it's going to come to b3. Black played the move rook to c7. If he had played the move rook d7, now it would be time to do something with this knight, I think. And well, because he doesn't want to give up the knights for the rook, of course. So I think it would be strong to play this move. And after knight e4, once again the rooks are kind of shooting into thin air, and white's just going to continue with rook to b3 here. Okay, so after rook a3, he played rook to c7, rook b3 was played, rook to c6. Okay, so black has been driven into a really, really passive position. The knight on c8 is passive, the rook on c6 is passive. They're just taking up totally defensive roles. The bishop is shut in because of this pawn on e5. So now white continues with knight to e4, just slowly improving the position of his pieces. And if he's just left to his own devices, he could easily play a plan like this. And this might seem a little bit far-fetched, but he could definitely double up and go after this weakness some more and win it. So black needs to be very careful with what he does in this position. Okay, he tries to improve the position of his bishop here on g7. He drops it back to f8. White activates his king first and prevents anything like rook d3. Not that it would be important probably, but it's a good safety move. Bishop 7, f4. So why not? Maybe he can start to play on the king side also. We can imagine eventually a plan like rook here, g4, and f5, and breaking through on the king side, playing on both sides of the board, which is a good rule to remember, that usually it's not enough to win a game just attacking one weakness, and it's always a good idea to create more weaknesses. At least try to have two weaknesses to go after in a game, and it's very difficult for an opponent to defend both weaknesses. So H5 was King F8 was played, which is given as a mistake. H5 was suggested in the notes to this game, but to be honest, I don't really think it would have made a huge difference. I mean, the black position is quite passive here, and white has a very nice choice of plans. He could play the move H3 in order to play the move G4 next move, or after H5, he could play the other plan that I mentioned with Rook A1 and playing Rook here and Rook here and over to B3, and then eventually the B6 pawn will probably fall, or black will have to go very, very passive. Although I think I like the kingside expansion idea more, because if we play the rook over here to A1 and double the rooks over on the B file, well, maybe black has a plan like he could play rook here and bishop D8 and try to defend it like that. And even though that looks very passive, and it is, it might be hard to break through. So King F8 was played, and now he plays G4. So as we talked about, playing on both sides of the board, and there's no rush. That's the other thing to remember in a position like this. When your opponent has absolutely no counterplay, and the idea is just to slowly improve the position of your pieces and to slowly build on your advantages, there's never a reason to rush. Actually, another reason to be very patient and try to go slowly and methodically is that a lot of opponents will become impatient and make mistakes like that and lash out, and then you can win the game even easier and faster because they will make an impatient decision at some point. Okay, so he centralizes his king, and now rook F1 was played. And this could be for several things. I mean, the rook could be used here for several things. Maybe he's going to play F5. Maybe he's going to play rook F3 and rook H3 and attack this pawn on H6. So this is another good thing to keep in mind, is to try and make these dual-purpose moves, or moves that have even more than two purposes, because it will keep your opponent guessing, and maybe he'll defend against one threat and miss the other threat. So the main thing is just to keep all your options open and keep putting pressure on your opponent. Rook D5 was played. Okay. Rook F3. Rook D8. So black really can't do much. He's just shifting back and forth. Okay, so the first plan was carried out. Rook H3. And actually, this move was easy to calculate the consequences of, because there's only one way to defend the H6 pawn. So you don't even have to calculate the other lines that don't defend the H6 pawn, because black is just giving white a free pawn otherwise. And with no counterplay, there's really nothing to worry about there. So the move he had to calculate was bishop F8. And Fischer found a very nice tactical solution to this. And this is not really a surprising solution, because if we go through the whole position and we see that each of white's pieces is extremely active and each of black's pieces is extremely passive, oftentimes this lends itself to tactical solutions and finishes that involve highlighting the fact that your pieces are active and they can go into attacking positions very easily, and black's pieces are just not well equipped enough to defend the attack. So the move knight takes A5 was played, and the point is that if black takes back with B takes A5, then knight F6 check, king E7 is the only move, and then rook B7, and black is actually going to get checkmated here. He's going to lose all his material and then get checkmated. So this one is also not that difficult to spot if we calculate the forcing moves. I mean, we have to calculate the move knight takes a5, and once we've seen knight takes a5 and the point of that move, the rest can follow along. So after knight takes a5, this knight was taboo, and so black had to retreat the rook. There's only one square to do that. Okay, rook c7, but of course this position is totally hopeless now. White's won a pawn, and now b6 is going to get attacked again. Okay, black tried to counterattack on a4, but white was happy to exchange pieces considering the fact that he had won a pawn. Okay, and now the other thing to keep in mind is that this rook takes a4 move was not possible because of the same idea, and black is going to get checkmated here. So white is effectively up 2 pawns. Okay, black plays this move. And now white sort of goes in for the kill. Knight f6 check. And the first point is that king e7 would be possible now. He's not going to get checkmated immediately. But after the move rook d3, he can't take on a4 because of checkmate on d7. And so maybe he would play a move like bishop to g7. And then I think white could play the move knight e4. Or, you know, this might not even be the cleanest way to win. I think that after king e7, he could also consider playing the move pawn to b3 and just defending everything. Doesn't look like black has a really good solution to that, so that looks fairly clean. Okay, so after this move, knight f6 check, black decided to play king d8. Okay, now white has a number of different ways to win. Fischer picked a very nice one, rook c6, so he's just attacking the pawn on c5, even though it's defended for the moment. And of course, the pawn on a4 is still taboo due to rook d3 check, and white is threatening to play rook d3 check. So black offers the exchange of rooks, but of course, white is already 2 pawns up, so it's going to be very difficult to do anything for black. Okay, he plays the check, and now he's happy to exchange, and just keeps gaining more time and creating more threats and winning more material. He takes, so now he's 3 pawns up, and it's important that black can't take this because he would lose the bishop. So fantastic tactical control throughout the game. Fantastic just control of the position. Black has been totally dominated this whole game. Okay, he played the move rook to c4. Pawn to c4. Okay, trying to get active, but knight d7 was strong. And the bishop just has nowhere to go, basically. He plays bishop to c5, but of course white's going to take that. He's up lots and lots of material. Rook c7 check. And that forces the move king d5 because otherwise white would take the pawn on c4. And now he plays a really, really strong move, which is pawn to b4. At first it looks very, very unnecessary and strange, but the idea is that if black were to take this pawn, then king d3 is actually going to put him in a mating net. He's threatening to play pawn to c4 on the next move with checkmate, and there's really nothing black can do. Rook takes a4, pawn to c4, rook takes here, b2, but this is going to be far too slow. So white would win like that. So after b4, he just resigned. He also realized that the a4 pawn could be taken, but now that allows white to play rook c5 check, king e4, rook takes, king d5, rook d4, king c6, and he'll just continue to take pawns. He can take every one of black's pawns here with rook d6 check. So that was just completely hopeless for black. Also b5 wins. It's a little bit more elegant way to win if you want to win like this. And f5 and creating a passed pawn over here, and the king will be too slow. So there's numerous ways to win there. So yeah, I really liked that game, and it showed a clear path, and it's really a trademark type of game for Fischer.